Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this edition of classes for appreciating poetry. Second semester revisions തുടങ്ങുകയാണ്, വളരെ തകൃതിയിൽ തുടങ്ങുകയാണ്. ഇന്ന് actually I received a note from one student. ആ സ്റ്റുഡന്റിന്റെ പേര് ഞാൻ ഇതിൽ പറയുന്നില്ല, പക്ഷേ that the message made me very happy. The message actually read that I watched your video on academic writing. The classes really helped me. Thank you. And I need all the classes on academic writing. So thank you very much for such glowing comments. And naturally, this makes us, thrilled to go forward. And this will not have been possible unless I had the support of strong people with me. And all of them are contributing their might totally free of cost. I'd like to introduce you to Subin Varghese, who's assistant professor at Lisa College. Subin, hello, Varnolu. And
hello, everyone. Good morning and have a nice
Noel
day.
Anthony, who is an assistant professor at Dayapuram College of Arts and Science. Hello, Varnolu. And also Dr. Prashant VG, my best friend, who has been with me, my partner of crime എന്ന് പറയാൻ പാടില്ല, പക്ഷേ ബാക്കി എല്ലാത്തിനും പ്രശാന്തിന്റെ കൂടെ ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ട്. So he's the head of the department of RSM SNDP Yogam College Koilandi. And we also got two ambassadors. അവർ പിന്നെ അവർക്ക് മുഖം ഇപ്പൊ കാണിക്കേണ്ടതാണ്, എന്തായാലും അവരുടെ മുഖം ഞങ്ങൾ ഒരു ദിവസം കാണിക്കും. They are our ambassadors, Viragini Chandran and Amrita Mol. So today the first lesson is on Skylark. And the second lesson is by Label Dam Samasi. അപ്പോൾ ഇവരെ പറ്റി അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എന്തെങ്കിലും കുറച്ച് കാര്യങ്ങളൊന്ന് നമുക്ക് കേൾക്കാം. ഫസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ഓൾ, നോവൽ ആന്റണി സർ.
ഓക്കെ, താങ്ക് യു സർ. ഗുഡ് മോർണിംഗ് എവരിവൺ. നമ്മൾ ഓട്ട് സ്കൈലാർക്ക് PB ഷെല്ലിയുടെ ഫേമസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള വർക്കാണ് നമുക്കറിയാം. നമ്മൾ PB ഷെല്ലി ഒരു റൊമാൻറ്റിക് പോയിന്റ് ആണ്. റൊമാൻറ്റിസിസത്തിന് മുമ്പ് നിയോ ക്ലാസിക്കൽ ഏജിൽ നമ്മൾ നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ വളരെ റൂൾസ് ആൻഡ് റെഗുലേഷൻസ് ആയിരുന്നു അന്നത്തെ കാലഘട്ടത്തിൽ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നത്. അവിടെ നിന്നും റൊമാൻറ്റിസിസത്തിലോട്ട് വരാൻ നേരത്ത് ഒരു നേച്ചർ ഓറിയന്റഡ് ഓർഡിനറി ലാംഗ്വേജ്, ഹ്യൂമൻ ലൈഫ്, അങ്ങനെയുള്ള ഒരു പോയിന്റിലോട്ടാണ് പോകുന്നത്. PB ഷെല്ലിയുടെ ലൈഫ് നോക്കിയാൽ നമുക്ക് കാണാൻ സാധിക്കും, അദ്ദേഹം ഒരു ഫിലോസഫിക്കൽ ആൻഡ് റെവല്യൂഷണറി പോയിന്റ് ആയിരുന്നു. ഈ യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി കോളേജിൽ പഠിക്കാൻ നേരത്ത് ഈ നെസസിറ്റി ഓഫ് എത്തീസം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ടുള്ള പാംഫ്ലെറ്റ്സ് സർക്കുലേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് പറഞ്ഞുകൊണ്ട് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി എക്സ്പെല് ചെയ്ത വ്യക്തിയാണ്. അപ്പോൾ സമൂഹത്തിൽ ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് നടക്കുന്ന ആൾക്കാരെല്ലാവരും നേരിടുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യമാണ്, പുതിയൊരു കാര്യം കൊണ്ടുവരുമ്പോൾ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പുതിയൊരു ആശയം കൊണ്ടുവരുമ്പോൾ അവരെന്ത് ചെയ്യുക, ഒറ്റപ്പെടേണ്ടി വരും. എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു നമ്മൾ റോബർട്ട് ഫ്രോസ്റ്റിന്റെ റോഡ് നോട്ട് ടേക്കുള്ളത് പറയുന്ന പോലെ എല്ലാവരും എടുക്കുന്ന പാതയല്ല PB ഷെല്ലി എടുത്തത്. രണ്ട്, അദ്ദേഹം ഒരു ക്രിയേറ്റീവ് പോയിന്റ് ആണെന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ക്രിയേറ്റീവ് പോയിന്റ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ബേസിക്കലി നേച്ചറിലോട്ട് നോക്കിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന വ്യക്തി. നമുക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും കിട്ടിയിരിക്കുന്ന 5 സെൻസസ് ഉണ്ട്. എനിക്ക് അറിഞ്ഞൂടെ എത്ര പേരാണ് ഈ 5 സെൻസസ് പരിപൂർണമായി ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നത്. നിങ്ങൾ വെറുതെ ഒരു ആൾക്കൂട്ടത്തിന്റെ ഇടയിൽ പോയി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നിങ്ങൾക്കൊരു സ്ട്രേഞ്ചർലി ഫീലിംഗ് തോന്നിയാൽ നിങ്ങൾ നിങ്ങളുടെ മൊബൈൽ എടുത്തിട്ട് എന്ത് ചെയ്യും, ആ മൊബൈലിൽ നോക്കിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കും. നിങ്ങൾ ട്രെയിൻ യാത്രയിൽ പോവുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾ ഒന്നില്ലെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങളുടെ മൊബൈൽ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ആളുകളെ നോക്കാതെ പുറത്തുള്ള കാഴ്ചകൾ കാണാതെ സിനിമ കണ്ടുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കും. അപ്പോൾ നേച്ചറിലോട്ട് നോക്കുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങൾ ഈ 5 സെൻസ് തുറക്കണം. എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു PB ഷെല്ലിയുടെ പോയിന്റ്സ് എല്ലാം നമ്മളെ നേച്ചറിലോട്ട് കൊണ്ടുപോവുകയാണ്. അപ്പൊ ഈ 5 സെൻസ് തുറന്നാൽ മാത്രമേ നമുക്ക് എന്ത് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റൂ, നേച്ചറിലോട്ട് പോകാനും നമ്മളുടെ ക്രിയേറ്റീവ് ഇമാജിനേഷൻ ഡെവലപ്പ് ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കുകയുള്ളൂ. ഇത് തന്നെയാണ് ഓട്ട് സ്കൈലാർക്കിൽ പറയുന്നത്. താങ്ക് യു സർ.
താങ്ക് യു നോവൽ ആന്റണി സർ. ആൻഡ് ഓവർ ടു സുബിൻ, ഒരു ചെറിയ കമന്റ് എന്തെങ്കിലും?
ഓക്കെ, സ്കൈലാർക്ക് ഇത് PGക്ക് പഠിച്ചതല്ലാതെ ഈ ചാപ്റ്റർ ഞാൻ എടുത്തിട്ടില്ല. ബട്ട് സ്റ്റിൽ ഒരു ബേർഡ് ആണെന്നും അതിന്റെ സൗണ്ടിനെ കുറിച്ചും ഒക്കെയുള്ള ഡിസ്ക്രിപ്ഷൻ ഒക്കെ കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ ഇതിനകത്തുണ്ട്. സോ കൂടുതൽ ഞാൻ ഇതിനെ കുറിച്ച് പറയുന്നില്ല. ഓവർ ടു പ്രശാന്ത് സർ.
Yes, Prashant sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Subin. Now I think two finest romantic poems are prescribed for you as a characteristic or representative poem. One by Percy B. Shelley and another by Keats. And when you take up the chronology, I think I will talk on Shelley first, then come to Keats. Shelley, as Noel rightly mentioned, he was a rebel right from beginning. So just like our Byron, Lord Byron, he was a rebel right from beginning, and he never conformed to the traditional views. He was always rebelling against all the convention, and naturally, he and along with Keats, he can be called the second generation of romantic poets. The first generation being Wordsworth and Coleridge. And though there is not very apparently much difference from the kind of poetry, the kind of attitude between these two generations, there are subtle differences, right? While Wordsworth was actually reflecting on nature, Coleridge was a bit more philosophical, right? Whereas when you come to Shelley, there is also a very strong element or very strong passion for the rebels, especially when you come to poems like Prometheus Unbound and other poems. So Shelley had a very key passion for the villain. You have Satan being considered better than God, right? I mean, when Shelley actually rereads the scriptures, or maybe Milton. So Shelley had this passion, but this particular poem, Skylark, that you are going to look at today, has a typical romantic strain where he listens to Skylark. And Skylark actually transports Shelley from one realm of torture and pain to a realm of soothing comfort. So romantics always sought for this kind of a realm where they can be actually transported to from a world of worries, a world of concern, a world of strain, that is the human world, to a world of everlasting comfort and everlasting soothing. So this is the key idea behind this particular poem. And when you come down to Keats, for example, Keats was the last romantic poet to be born and the first to die. He only had a very short span of life, around 25 years. So Keats is actually, this belongs to one of the earlier poems. Actually, this is a typical romantic poem where he meets a strange girl with whom he falls in love. So it's a French title meaning the girl without the name. Name is a beautiful woman. The beautiful woman without mercy. Without mercy in the sense the proposal was actually requited. She does not actually respond to the love of the poet. So that's why he calls her the beautiful girl without mercy. That also is a typical poem, but not a very representative poem of Keats. But this is a often well-read poem. It's a kind of a there are a I think a kind of it is a ballad kind of a poem where he makes a very acute expression on the kind of unrequited love, which by that time he was having tuberculosis and he was about to, I mean, he knew that his days were numbered. So when a person knows that his days are numbered, he would have a kind of a passion for his life. So this particular autobiographical note would actually, when you consider this poem, when you read the poem with this background, you understand the poem better. He suddenly falls so passionate about this particular life that he had, and also maybe he is reminded of his own lover, Fanny Brown. Thank you. So you just go to the poem and enjoy the poem. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prashant. We have Bindu Ahmad. Of Providence Women's College. We're so happy. Bindu, we were actually struggling to tell about what Skylark is and about all those things. But at the same time, seeing you on Zoom, we're so happy. And I'm sure the students also would love to hear from you. Possibly you could just share a few words about the poem, or in general, whatever.
In general.
Bindu,
your audio is not muted. Just
audio needs to switch down.
Unmute the audio.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Yeah.
All right.
Is the screening over?
Yes, it's perfect.
Yeah, it is live.
It's going live.
Is the screening over?
No.
Okay.
No, screening is not over.
Sorry, it's just next.
It's a prologue.
This is the prologue. Yes.
It's just about to begin, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay, so good morning, dear students. I'm so sorry I came in just now. Shelley parti parayna samayathu I normally go into raptures, or especially this poem. So, Shelley, as Dr. Prashant would probably have already introduced told you just now, is one among the second generation of romantic poets. William Wordsworth, Coleridge, and Coleridge, the senior generation, they had already got established as major romantic poets. The romantic movement had been launched by them by the time that Shelley and Keats were born. And both these poets, Shelley, Keats, both of them had very short lives. Keats died at the tender age of 26 or 29, and Shelley before 30. He was just 29 when he too passed away. He died because of a boat capsize. Now, by the time they left the world, and at that time, at the time of their death, the senior poets were still continuing to write, and they were recognized as major romantic poets even at that point of time. But within these 30 years, these two poets had contributed some of the best poems to the English language, poems which really define the Romantic age. And one such poem is the Skylark. I think I would not hesitate to call the Skylark, a poem that epitomizes the Romantic age. Romantic age in the endokano features, all that you have in the Skylark. And in fact, in one way, you can consider the Skylark as, or the bird, the Skylark as, Shelley's conception of a poet. Shelleyയുടെ മനസ്സിൽ ഒരു കവി ആയാൽ എന്തായിരിക്കണം, അതെല്ലാം ഈ സ്കൈലാക്കിന്റെ പാട്ടിൽ അദ്ദേഹം കൺവേ ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. Now, what is the Skylark? നമുക്ക് വലിയ പരിചയമില്ലാത്തൊരു ബേർഡാണ്. നമ്മൾ സാധാരണ കാണുന്ന ഒരു ബേർഡ് അല്ല. ഇറ്റ്സ് എ ബേർഡ് ദാറ്റ്സ് നോർമലി ഫൗണ്ട് ഇൻ യൂറോപ്യൻ കൺട്രീസിലാണ് കൂടുതൽ കാണാറുള്ളത്. നമ്മളുടെ രാജ്യത്ത് ട്രോപ്പിക്കൽ കൺട്രീസിൽ ഇല്ല ഇത്. It's a bird that cannot survive here. And even in countries like America, ഈ ബേർഡ് ഇല്ല ശരിക്കും. അതൊരു ഷെല്ലി ഇറ്റലിയിൽ താമസിച്ച സമയത്താണ് ഈ ബേർഡിനെ കണ്ടതും ഈ കവിത എഴുതിയതും എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. Of course, it is found in England as well, some of the European countries. It's a slight, കാണാൻ അത്ര വലിയ impressive അല്ലാത്ത ഒരു small bird. It is there in the slide. You can see, take a look at the picture. The bird looks so unimpressive, but that is precisely the point. ഇത്രയും unimpressive ആയിട്ട് നമ്മൾ കണ്ടാൽ ഒരു രണ്ടാമതൊരു നോട്ടം കൊടുക്കാത്ത ഈ ബേർഡ്, when it sings, it takes you to another level altogether. ഒരു heavenly ലെവലിലേക്ക് കൊണ്ടുപോകുന്നു എന്നാണ് ഷെല്ലി ഇതിനെ കുറിച്ച് പറയുന്നത്. And one speciality about the bird is that you cannot listen to it singing when you watch it. അതായത് സ്റ്റേഷനറി ആവുന്ന സമയത്ത്, ഒരു മരത്തിന്റെ കൊമ്പിലിരിക്കുന്ന സമയത്തോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നിലത്തിരിക്കുന്ന സമയത്ത് ഈ ബേർഡ് പാടില്ല. ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് ഇൻ ഫ്ലൈറ്റ് ദാറ്റ് ഇറ്റ് സിങ്സ്. ദിസ് ഇസ് വെയർ ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് ഡിഫറെന്റ് ഫ്രം കീറ്റ്സസ് നൈറ്റിംഗേൽ. നൈറ്റിംഗേൽ ഇരുന്നിട്ട് പാടുന്ന ഒരു പക്ഷിയാണ്, വേറസ് ഷെല്ലിയുടെ ഈ സ്കൈലാർക്ക് പറന്ന് പാടുന്നത്. That again is very significant about Shelley's poetry in general. Shelley കുറെ കീറ്റ്സ് ആണ് ഏറ്റവും ഫേമസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഓഡ്സ് എഴുതിയത്. എല്ലാവരും പറയാറുണ്ട് കീറ്റ്സ് കുറെ കവിതകൾ എഴുതിയിട്ടുണ്ട്, പക്ഷെ ഓൺലി ആ 6 ഓഡ്സ്, Ode to Autumn, Ode to a Nightingale, Ode to the Melancholy, Ode to Psyche, Ode to the Grecian Urn, and പിന്നെന്താണ് the 6th ode, Ode to Psyche, Melancholy, the Grecian Urn, Autumn, the Nightingale, and Indolence, Ode to Indolence. ഈ 6 ഓഡ്സ് ആണ് കീറ്റ്സിന്റെ. എല്ലാവരും critics പറയുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യം, if he had written only those 6 odes in his life, വേറെ ഒന്നും കവിതകൾ വേറെ ഒന്നും എഴുതിയിട്ടില്ലെങ്കിൽ പോലും he would still be considered one of the greatest poets. അപ്പൊ ഓഡ് കീറ്റ്സിന്റെ ഒരു പ്രത്യേകതയായിട്ട് കാണാറുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ ഷെല്ലിയും ചില ഓഡ്സ് എഴുതിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. To a Skylark, Ode to the West Wind, Ode to the Cloud, ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള. Now, ഇതും ഷെല്ലിയുടെ വേറെ ചില poems like Ode to Liberty, Queen Mab, ഇതൊക്കെയാണ് ഇദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ വേറെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട കവിതകൾ. When you look at these titles, Skylark, The Cloud, Queen Mab, liberty. Many of his poems, in fact, read inganeyulla oruvidham ella poems, what he celebrates, the kind of objects or things or people he places at the center, again, are never rooted. Bhumiyil rooted ആയിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളെയല്ല. ഷെല്ലി സെലിബ്രേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത് എപ്പോഴും പറന്ന് പോകുന്ന ആകാശത്തോട് അടുപ്പമുള്ള സ്കൈലാർക്ക്, ദ ക്ലൗഡ്, ദ വെസ്റ്റ് വിൻഡ്, ഇതിനൊന്നും നമുക്ക് കെട്ടിവെക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ല. They are free. They are symbols. I mean, each one of them is a symbol of great liberty and freedom. And ഷെല്ലിയുടെ കവിതയുടെ ഏറ്റവും വലിയ പോയിന്റും അത് തന്നെയാണ്. He was a lifelong lover of liberty. ഈ ഭൂമിയിൽ എല്ലാവരും ഫ്രീ ആയിരിക്കണം. There should be no restriction on anyone. There should be no earthly tie that binds you down. Because ഭൂമിയിലോട്ട് നിങ്ങൾ, if you are tied down, then you will not be able to live your life with your full human potential എന്നായിരുന്നു അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ വിശ്വാസം. അപ്പൊ എപ്പോഴും ഈ ക്ലൗഡിനെ പോലെ ആകാശത്തിൽ സഞ്ചരിക്കുക, സ്കൈലാക്കിനെ പോലെ പറന്ന് പാടുക, വെസ്റ്റ് വിൻഡിനെ പോലെ എന്നും ഫോഴ്സ്ഫുള്ളി ഈ ലൈഫിൽ ആഞ്ഞു വീശുക. This was his ideal of life, highlighted in every one of his poems. He was such a lover of liberty that he often got into trouble because of that. ഓക്സ്ഫോർഡ് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റിയിൽ പഠിക്കുന്ന സമയത്ത് ദ നെസസിറ്റി ഓഫ് എത്തീസം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞൊരു പാംഫ്ലെറ്റ് എഴുതുകയുണ്ടായി along with a friend of his. You can imagine ഓക്സ്ഫോർഡ് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി പോലെയുള്ള ഒരു എലീറ്റ് കൺസർവേറ്റീവ് സ്പേസിൽ എത്തീസം, അതായത് ദൈവവിശ്വാസത്തിനെതിരായിട്ടൊരു നിലപാട് എടുക്കുകയാണ്. ദൈവം വേണ്ട, ദൈവമില്ല എന്നുള്ളൊരു സ്റ്റാൻഡാണ് എത്തീസ്റ്റ് എടുക്കുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് ദ നെസസിറ്റി ഓഫ് എത്തീസം, ബിക്കോസ് അക്കോർഡിംഗ് ടു ഹിം നമ്മൾ മനുഷ്യരായിട്ട് ഉണ്ടാക്കിയിട്ടുള്ള ഈ ഭൂമിയിലുള്ള എല്ലാ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷൻസും, റിലിജൻ, ദ ഫാമിലി, മാരേജ്, എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ, ഇതെല്ലാം they are restrictive. They limit you. They do not allow you to live your life according to your full potential. അപ്പം ഈ റിലിജനെതിരെ വളരെ സ്ട്രോങ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു പാംഫ്ലെറ്റ് ആണ് ഈ ചെറുപ്രായത്തിൽ. ഹി വാസ് ഓൺലി ഇൻ ഹിസ് ടീൻസ് അറ്റ് ദാറ്റ് പോയിന്റ് ഓഫ് ടൈം. ആൻഡ് നാച്ചുറലി ഓക്സ്ഫോർഡ് യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി പോലെയുള്ള ഒരു സ്ഥലത്ത് ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു കാര്യം എഴുതിയാൽ they wouldn't കയ്യും കെട്ടി നോക്കിയിരിക്കില്ല. he just got banished from Oxford University. വീട്ടിൽ പോയ സമയത്ത് again for his very strange, വളരെ ബൊഹീമിയൻ ആയിട്ടുള്ള വളരെ ഫ്രീ ലൈഫ്, അരിസ്റ്റോക്രാറ്റിക് അച്ഛനും ഒട്ടും താല്പര്യമുണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല. ഹി വാസ് ആക്ച്വലി ഡിസ്ഇൻഹെറിറ്റഡ് ഇൻ ഹിസ് ഹൗസ് ഓൾസോ. അങ്ങനെയാണ് അദ്ദേഹത്തിനേക്കാൾ he got into he married somebody much against his aristocratic father's desires. He could not continue to live in England, when he got into an involvement with another woman. എപ്പോഴും ഇയാള് എഴുതപ്പെട്ട റൂൾസിന് against ആണ് ഇയാളുടെ ജീവിതം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നത്, which is why he had to run away to Italy actually. And അവിടെ വെച്ചിട്ടാണ് ഈ സ്കൈലാക്കിനെ കണ്ടത്. ഇത് പറയാൻ കാരണം ഇത് മാത്രമാണ്. Freedom and liberty would be the highlight of Shelley's poetry, and all his life, as a human being and as a poet, he fought against it. എല്ലാ ചങ്ങലകളും വെട്ടിമുറിച്ചിട്ട് ഒരു റിബൽ ആയിട്ട് തന്നെയായിരുന്നു ഇദ്ദേഹം ജീവിച്ചത്. He was a real rebel. And when you look at the Skylark, ഈ whole poem എന്താണ്? It is all about the Skylark's song. And what the Skylark song represents is this absolute liberty. സ്കൈലാക്കിന് എന്തുകൊണ്ട് ഇങ്ങനെ പാടാൻ പറ്റുന്നു? ബിക്കോസ് ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് നോട്ട് റൂട്ടഡ് ടു ദി എർത്ത്. ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് ഓൾവേസ് ഇൻ ഫ്ലൈറ്റ്, ആൻഡ് therefore it is not controlled by the earth. ഭൂമിയാൽ കൺട്രോൾ ചെയ്യപ്പെട്ട ഒരു കാര്യത്തിനും സ്കൈലാക്കിനെ പോലെ പാടാൻ പറ്റില്ല. That is what in a nutshell ഈ മെസ്സേജ് പറയുന്നത്. അപ്പം സ്കൈലാർക്ക് there becomes a representation of the poet himself. ഷെല്ലിയുടെ മനസ്സിലുള്ള ആദർശ കവി, the ideal poet, is somebody who would be able to sing in this free, unrestricted manner and give you the sight of a new world. ഷെല്ലിയുടെ എല്ലാ കവിതയിലും ഇതും ഒരു തീമാണ്. ഈ റെവല്യൂഷനിലൂടെ പുതിയൊരു ലോകത്തിന്റെ ക്രിയേഷൻ. West Wind, Ode to the West Wind, West Wind destroys everything. Pakshe, our destruction in a similar manner, the cloud is also something that can give you the vision of a new world. Prometheus Unbound. Prometheus Unbound in the Shelley or verse drama. Kavida രൂപത്തിൽ എഴുതിയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഡ്രാമയാണ്. നമ്മള് എസ്കെലസിന്റെ ഗ്രീക്ക് എസ്കെലസിന്റെ പ്രൊമിത്തിയസ് ബൗണ്ടിനെ കുറിച്ചേ കേട്ടിട്ടുള്ളൂ. ബൗണ്ട് എന്നുള്ള സ്ഥിതി ഷെല്ലിക്ക് താല്പര്യമില്ല. ഷെല്ലി എന്ത് ചെയ്തി ആ കഥ തിരിച്ച് he rewrote it and he gave it the title Prometheus Unbound. Prometheus Unboundum ഇത് തന്നെയാണ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. പുതിയൊരു ലോകത്തിന്റെ കാഴ്ച നമ്മൾക്ക് തരുന്നു. And the Skylark Song, Shelley has in his mind the image of a poet who, like the skylark, can give you the vision of a new world. ആ രീതിയിലാണ് ഈ കവിത എഴുതിയിട്ടുള്ളത് 3 സെക്ഷനിൽ. where in the first stanza he describes the song of the skylark. ഇദ്ദേഹം ഒരിക്കലും കേട്ടിട്ടില്ലാത്ത തരം ഒരു സോങ് ആണെന്നാ പറയുന്നത്. which is why he considers it to be not an ordinary bird. ഇത് the earth, you belong to heaven or somewhere near it, is what he says. Aditya 6 stanzas, he describes the song of the skylark. In the second section, the second 6 stanzas, he tries to find a fitting analogy. Nammalku parijayumulla endine poleyaanu ee skylark. As I told you, the skylark is hardly ever seen. It is always in flight, as a result of which he tries to compare it. Nammalde manasil, there are certain images of beauty. For example, a rose, allengil the rainbow. He mentions 6 such images that we human beings are normally familiar with. But the Skylark Song is beyond all these. Nammalku parijayamalla beauty ide symbols okke oru limit vare adinte validity ullu. The Skylark Song surpasses all those. Idana adutha 6 lines. Pinneyulla avasanatha sectionilana where he addresses the skylark as a teacher. Teach us to sing like you. Njangal endu cheyanam to be able to sing like you. Adinte karanangal അദ്ദേഹം അന്വേഷിക്കുന്നു, and he comes to certain conclusions in the last section of the poem. So this is how he has structured the poem. Appom adu ningal vaayicittu allengil listen to the lecture and you will get a closer idea about each of the images that he uses. And ഒരു ഷെല്ലിയുടെ കവിതയിലെല്ലാം നിറഞ്ഞു നിൽക്കുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യം, that lyrical intensity. They are so full of rich colors, rich images, drawn mainly from the world of nature, and they have that musical quality. അതും ഈ കവിതയിൽ വളരെ പ്രാധാന്യത്തിൽ തന്നെ നമ്മൾക്ക് കാണാൻ പറ്റും, that lyrical intensity. So another reason why you can consider it as a typical Shelleyan poem and also a typical romantic poem, because romantic poetry il nammal endokkano njan parnille vicharikkunnathu, there will be that lyrical intensity. It will be the it set in the world of nature. It will sing about the imagination. Valare imaginative aayirkum romantic poems mulvan. Idil naraye anganeyulla imaginative aayittulla images ആണ് നിറഞ്ഞു നിൽക്കുന്നത്. It always places the വളരെ ഇമോഷണൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള വികാരഭരിതമായിട്ടുള്ള ലൈൻസ് ആയിരിക്കും. Again, you can find the same in these lines of the Skylark. So all the features of Shelley's poetry you can find in the Skylark. All the features of romantic poetry also you can find in the Skylark. അതാണ് അതിന്റെ ഒരു പ്രാധാന്യത. അതുകൊണ്ടായിരിക്കും നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഇത് പ്രിസ്ക്രൈബ്ഡ് ആയിരിക്കുന്നത്. ഇനി നിങ്ങൾ ലെക്ചർ കേട്ടോളൂ, അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് വേണമെങ്കിൽ ഞാൻ തിരിച്ചു വരാം. പോകുന്നതിന് മുമ്പ് ഒരു കാര്യം മാത്രമേ ഞാൻ പറയാം. മേ ബി ഐ ഹാവ് ഇൻക്ലൂഡഡ് ദാറ്റ് ഇൻ ദ സ്ലൈഡ് ഓൾസോ. ഈ ഷെല്ലി ഈ സ്കൈലാർക്കിനെ കുറിച്ച് ഇത്രയും പറഞ്ഞ സ്ഥിതിക്ക് നമ്മളും കേട്ടാൽ ചിന്തിച്ചു പോകും, നമുക്കൊന്ന് കേൾക്കണമല്ലോ ഈ സ്കൈലാർക്ക് എന്റെ സോങ് എന്ന്. ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് സെഡ് ദാറ്റ് ഏതോ ഒരു എസ്സേ, റോബർട്ട് ലിൻഡ് എഴുതിയ ഒരു എസ്സേയിൽ ഒരു കാര്യം ഈ പോയമിനെ കുറിച്ച് പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. There was an American lady, like many others, she was also so enraptured by the song of the Skylark that she decided to travel all the way from the United States to England, to Europe, just to listen to the Skylark's song. ഇവിടെ വരെ യാത്ര ചെയ്തു. അവർ കേട്ട സമയത്ത് അവർക്കൊരു സാധാരണ ഒരു പാട്ട് പോലെയൊക്കെ തോന്നിയുള്ളൂ. ഷെല്ലി പറയുന്ന പോലെയുള്ള ഒരു മാജിക്കൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഹെവൻലി, ഷെല്ലി ഇതിനെ ഹെവൻലി തന്നെയാ പറയുന്നത്, ഭൂമിയല്ല സ്വർഗത്തിനോട് അടുത്ത് നിൽക്കുന്നത്. സോ ഷീ ഡിഡ് നോട്ട് ഫൈൻഡ് എനിത്തിങ് സോ സ്പെക്ടാക്കുലർലി ഹെവൻലി അബൌട്ട് ഇറ്റ്. ആൻഡ് വാട്ട് ഷീ റോട്ട് ഇസ്, അവരൊരു ലൈൻ എഴുതി, അതൊരു വളരെ ഫേമസ് ലൈനാണ്. ഷീ സെഡ്, addressing the Skylark, "Oh Skylark, thou didst not sing a song half as sweet as Shelley sang to thee." അതായത് ഷെല്ലി സ്കൈലാക്കിനെ കുറിച്ച് പാടിയ പാട്ട് സ്കൈലാക്കിന്റെ പാട്ടിനെക്കാട്ടിലും അപ്പുറമാണ് എന്നാണ് അവർ പറയുന്നത്. "Thou didst not sing a song half as sweet as Shelley sang to thee." ആ ലൈൻ വെച്ചിട്ട് ഞാൻ നിർത്താം. You can decide whether that is true or whether Shelley's poetry, of what you feel about Shelley's poetry. Listen to the presentation now. Okay, I'll come back. Maybe our presentation, it takes something like 40 minutes. I'll come back after that.
Thank you, Bindu. Adoru double bonanza aanu.
Thank you.
Also going into raptures.
അതാ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞത്, I myself go into raptures. I have to control myself. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ആവേശം കുറച്ച് കൂടി പോകും.
Anyway, I think we will also be doing
Unlike the lady, your introduction was double sweet.
Okay. Carry on then. I have some work. Can you carry on with the presentation now?
Sure, we will.
Yeah.
In the revision also, I just wanted to tell you that.
Okay.
I'll be inviting you again.
Okay, fine.
And so Viragini and Amrita, thank you, Bindu. And Viragini and Amrita will give you the explanation of how to go into the quiz. അതിൽ ഈ പ്രാവശ്യം 2 ക്വിസ് ഉണ്ട്. ഒന്ന് ഇത് ബിന്ദു മാമിന്റെ ലെസണും പിന്നെ ലബൽ ഡാംസ മേഴ്സിയും കൂടി പ്ലേ ചെയ്യും. ഇത് രണ്ടും നിങ്ങൾ കാണുക. ലബൽ ഡാംസ മേഴ്സി എനിക്ക് ഒരു ഓർമ്മ വരുന്നത് നമ്മുടെ ടൊവിനോടാണോ, അതൊരു യക്ഷി ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു പാട്ടുണ്ടല്ലോ. സുബിൻ അത് അറിയോ? നോവൽ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വിരാഗിനി അറിയോ? യക്ഷി വന്നല്ലോ എന്നൊക്കെ കണ്ടൊരു പാട്ടുണ്ടല്ലോ.
ടൊവിനോ അല്ല, അത് നീരജ് മാധവ്.
അതന്നെ. ഓക്കെ, യെസ്. പാട്ടിനോട് ഒരു സാമ്യത ഉണ്ടോ ഈ ലബൽ ഡാംസ മേഴ്സി?
ലിറ്റിൽ ബിറ്റ്.
അതെ. ഓക്കെ, അപ്പൊ വിരാഗിനി മറ്റേ ഇത് പറഞ്ഞോളൂ, ക്വിസിനെ പറ്റി എങ്ങനെയാന്ന്.
ഓക്കെ, അപ്പോ ഇന്നത്തെ 2 ചാപ്റ്റേഴ്സ്, ദ ചാപ്റ്റേഴ്സ് ലാബെല്ല ഡെയിംസ് ആൻഡ് മേഴ്സി and Ode to Skylark. The quiz will be on these chapters, and I think it's in 15 marks. So the link will be providing to you. Apo a link il kera vich the link will be directing to englishskills.com, englishskills1.com. So അപ്പൊ അവിടെ ടുഡേസ് ക്വിസ് കാണാം. അതിൽ ക്ലിക്ക് ചെയ്താൽ നിങ്ങളുടെ ക്വിസ് അവിടെ റെഡി ആയിരിക്കും. 15 മാർക്സിനാണ് ക്വിസ് ഉള്ളത്. അപ്പോൾ അതിൽ ഇമെയിൽ അഡ്രസ്സ് ചോദിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, അത് റിക്വയർഡ് ആണ്. അത് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഞാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞ സെഷനിലും പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ തന്നെ ജസ്റ്റ് ഒരു നമ്മൾ ആരാണോ ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ സ്കോർ ചെയ്യുന്നത് 15 out of 15 കിട്ടുന്ന ആൾക്കാരുണ്ടാവുമല്ലോ, അപ്പൊ അവർക്ക് ഞങ്ങൾ ചെറിയൊരു പ്രൈസ് കൊടുക്കാൻ ആലോചിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. സോ ഇമെയിൽ അഡ്രസ് എന്തായാലും കൊടുക്കുക. അപ്പോ ഓൾ ദി ബെസ്റ്റ്. താങ്ക് യു സർ.
താങ്ക് യു. അമൃതമോൾ എന്തെങ്കിലും ആഡ് ചെയ്യാനുണ്ടോ? പറഞ്ഞോളൂ അമൃതമോൾ, കേൾക്കുന്നുണ്ട്? ഇല്ല, അപ്പോൾ ഷീസ് നോട്ട് ദർ. ഓക്കെ, സോ ദാറ്റ്സ് ഓൾ. താങ്ക് യു വെരി മച്ച് നോവൽ ആന്റണി സർ. താങ്ക് യു സുബിൻ. താങ്ക് യു പ്രശാന്ത്. താങ്ക് യു ബിന്ദു ഫോർ വണ്ടർഫുള്ളി coming over. And also with Agni and Amritamol, thank you to both of you. Enjoy the video.
Hello students, let's now take a look at an immortal English poem, To a Skylark, written by
the Romantic poet P.B. Shelley. This is a significant poem for your study since it can introduce you to various aspects of literary studies. In the first place, it can give you an understanding of poetry in general, its features, its unique qualities. It can help you to understand English romantic poetry the poems of the Romantic age. On another level, it can give you an insight into the form of the ode. The poem can also introduce you to the poetry of Shelley. And therefore, I have divided this presentation into 5 sections. We'll take a look at the features of the Romantic age and Romantic poetry in the first section. We will then move on to the ode as a poetic form. In the third section, we'll look at the significance of Shelley as a poet. And in the fourth and the fifth sections, we will analyze the poem To a Skylark and try to make a critical reading of the poem. To a Skylark can be considered as a typical poem of the English Romantic age. It has all the features of a romantic poem, the kind of poems written by poets like William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, Lord Byron, and P.B. Shelley himself. Romanticism was a cultural movement, one that developed in certain parts of Europe towards the latter part of the 18th century as a kind of reaction against the previous age of Enlightenment, which gave too much of importance to the faculty of reason. The Romantic age was one that was greatly inspired by the revolutions for freedom in America and France. The French Revolution of 1789, with its motto of liberty, equality, and fraternity, was something that inspired this new age. And they upheld the virtues of freedom, of individuality, of imagination, of spontaneity, of emotions over the intellect. And they had great reverence and love for nature, as is so clearly reflected in their poems. They also had great fascination for the supernatural. They considered childhood to be the best age or the phase in the life of a human being, because that is the phase when you are closest to heaven, when you are closest to divine existence, because you are the least corrupted by civilization, by the Industrial Revolution. And they had so much reverence for the spirit in each individual. They considered that spirit as more significant than anything that was approved by society. They upheld the individual over the society and therefore had great fascination for the simple rural folk, the outcasts who chose to live beyond the norms set by society, and anyone who rebelled against social dictates. And to sum up, therefore, you can say that the ideals of Romantic poetry were imagination, inspiration, instincts, individuality, and intuition. And these are the qualities that you can see celebrated in the poems of the Romantic poets. And you can see each one of these brought to the foreground in a poem like To a Skylark. To a Skylark is also a good example of an ode, a formal and solemn lyric poem that is often written in the form of an address and which praises or celebrates a person, place, thing, or idea. The term ode is derived from a Greek word, eidein, which means to chant or sing. And odes were performed in ancient Greece, where whenever there was an occasion to celebrate a victory. So the tone of an ode is always a lofty one. Its subject matter is serious and solemn. It's never trivial or light-hearted. And in keeping with that tone, that kind of tone and subject matter, the stanza structures are also often very elaborate and formal. The ode as a poetic form was very popular among the Romantic poets, the English Romantic poets, who considered it an ideal medium through which they could convey their spontaneous feelings and emotions and use the rich images that they were so fond of. One can think of the many odes, famous odes written by John Keats, for example, Ode to Autumn, Ode to a Grecian Earth, Ode to a Nightingale. And Shelley himself has written some immortal odes like Ode to the West Wind and the one that we have to study, Ode to a Skylark. Traditionally, an ode is divided into three sections: the strophe, the antistrophe, and the epode. That kind of structure largely holds good for the traditional odes like the Pindaric ode, named after the Greek poet Pindar, or the Horatian ode, named after the Roman poet Horace. They do not seem to be a feature of irregular odes like the ones that we have to study, which is written neither in the Pindaric nor the Horatian form. Shelley, along with Keats and Byron, belongs to the second generation of the English Romantic poets. Shelley is generally considered as one of the most lyrical and the most revolutionary among English poets. His poems reflect a great deal of passion and imagination. Nature, beauty, love, creativity, and liberty. These are some of the common themes of Shelley's poems. Shelley was more than anything else a rebel, a revolutionary who always questioned any form of authority. He hated any kind of institution or establishment which stood in the way of a full, free life for individuals. It was, because of that kind of spirit that at a very young age, when he was a student at the University of Oxford, he published, along with a friend of his, secretly published, a pamphlet titled The Necessity of Atheism. It was so controversial that naturally he was dismissed from the university. But that document or that pamphlet highlights all that Shelley stood for in his later works. Somebody who questioned authority, somebody who hated any kind of tyranny or despotism, and who always dreamed of a world of equality and liberty where individuals had the right to live freely the way their instinct prompted them to do. So this very sensitive soul that Shelley was, he expresses himself in his poems with a great deal of hope and joy and imagination. He always envisions a world, a new world. He considered a poet as a prophet, somebody who could transform the world, and somebody who could, through his poems, create a new world. So this note of change and hope of a better future is expressed in every poem of his. I think it is immortalized in that famous line in the poem Ode to the West Wind, with "If winter comes, can spring be far behind?" The finest features of Shelley's poetry, his lyricism, his rich imagery, the the revolutionary spirit, that the idealism, the spirit with which he dreamt of a new world, a world without tyranny or despotism, where equality reigns and where there is space for every individual to live his or her life freely. These qualities are seen expressed in every work of his, the major ones among which have been listed here: the poem Queen Mab, Alaster, The Mask of Anarchy, The Revolt of Islam, the famous odes, Ode to Liberty, Ode to the West Wind, The Cloud, Ode to a Skylark, and the plays Prometheus Unbound and Chenchi. We cannot make a list of Shelley's best work without mentioning the little sonnet Ozymandias and the elegy that he wrote in memory of Keats, Adonais, and the major work of literary criticism in prose, A Defense of Poetry. Shelley's views about poetry are best expressed in his prose work, A Defense of Poetry, where he states in very clear terms that poetry is something that is capable of transforming the world and creating the world anew. He calls it the most unfailing herald, companion, and follower of the awakening of a great people to work a beneficial change in opinion or institution. In other words, if anything can change the world, can change the mind of the people and thereby change the world, that is poetry. And this power of poetry is what he expresses equally well in the poem that we have to study, To a Skylark. To a Skylark is one of the finest of Shelley's works. It was composed in the year 1820, written during a period of the poet's life that he spent in Italy, a period that also saw the composition of some of his best-known poems. The poem must have been, needless to say, inspired by the sight of a skylark, a songbird that is a common sight in many a European countryside. But the bird in the poem is no ordinary bird. It is addressed with great reverence, with the kind of words that one would normally associate with divinity, like hail, thou, and thy, and so on. And at every stage in the poem, you find a kind of negation of the physical existence of the bird. In other words, it is presented not so much as a living bird, but as a spirit, as a supernatural being, something that belongs not to the earth, but to the heavens. In fact, so many of Shelley's poems are based on things that do not belong to the earth and are always in flight high above the earth. The west wind, for example, or the cloud. These are objects that just cannot be tethered or tied down to the earth. And that conveys a great deal about Shelley's spirit of freedom, the ideal that he upheld in all his works. So from the very beginning, the bird here is addressed as a blithe spirit, something that is so happy and joyous. It is a very high degree of joyousness that is conveyed by the use of the word blithe. Hail to thee, the poet hails the bird, which is no ordinary bird. He says, bird thou never wert. You were never a bird. It seems to be more of a spirit that belongs to the heavens. And then he describes the song of the skylark in a fantastic line that goes, profuse strains of unpremeditated art, It is so rich, so intense, so soulful, and it is spontaneous. Now, this is exactly what the Romantic poets in general and Shelley in particular believed regarding poetry. This was their conception of poetry. It is free, it is soulful, it is spontaneous, it is rich, and it is soulful. So that is the song of the skylark. And then he describes the flight of the bird. The skylark, unlike many other birds, is a bird that is more often seen in flight than perched on a tree or on the ground. Unlike the nightingale, for example, immortalized by Keats in his famous Ode, which is a bird that sings as it is stationary, the skylark is a bird that sings while it is in flight. And you hardly ever see the skylark sitting still anywhere. So that is why he compares it to a cloud of fire. There's also a biblical reference there, like a brilliantly lit cloud up there in the sky. The skylark flies high above the earth, and it's almost as if it spans the entire sky, the blue of the sky and the sea. And as it soars high, it sings, and as it sings, it soars high. In other words, there is no difference between the skylark and its song. Both merge into one. And this is also in keeping with Shelley's concept of the poet singing the poems or the songs in rapturous ecstasy. In the following stanzas, he describes the flight of the skylark at different points of time during the day, whether it's morning or afternoon or evening or late night. It's almost as if the skylark is always in flight. He describes the flight of the bird in the golden lighting of the setting sun. The skylark seems to be in flight, like an unbodied joy whose race is just begun. Even at the close of day, the skylark seems to be so full of life and energy, and its song is as fresh as the song that it sung in the morning. The pale purple evening almost melts around the flight. Even when the day merges into night and you have that beautiful purple light of the twilight sky, the skylark seems to be up in the skies singing. Like a star of heaven in the broad daylight, thou art unseen, but yet I hear thy shrill delight. The skylark is a very small bird, and when it flies high up, it's hardly seen, but you can see you can hear the song. The song is so loud and shrill and ecstatic that it is seen, it is heard, just like the star of heaven, the moon seen during daylight. In broad daylight, even though the moon is up there in the sky, you can hardly see it. You know that it's there, but you can hardly see it. Similarly, the skylark, you hardly see it, but you can hear its song. And then he compares it to the brilliant moonlight, that showers down on the earth on a dark night. Keen as are the arrows of that silver sphere, whose intense lamp narrows in the white dawn clear, until we hardly see, we feel that it is there. All the earth and air with thy voice is loud, as when night is bare, from one lonely cloud the moon rains out her beams and heaven is overflowed. You have the beautiful depiction of the moon coming out from behind a cloud and then raining its beautiful cool light on the dark earth below. And as magical as that, as soothing as that is the song of the skylark. It just rains down on the earth, and it's almost as if heaven is overflowing when you hear the skylark song. It is in the second section of the poem that the poet tries to find a fitting analogy for the skylark. He's so enraptured by the skylark song and he's kind of mystified by it. He does not know what it. He cannot define it in quantifiable terms, and that is why he keeps looking for a fitting analogy, an image that he is more or less familiar with, which would suit the skylark. And so you have a series of questions here asked in the next 6 stanzas, whether the skylark is like this or that image of beauty that we are normally familiar with. What thou art, we know not. What is most like thee? From rainbow clouds there flow not drops so bright to see, as from thy presence showers a rain of melody. One of the most brilliant images of beauty that the poet is familiar with is that of a beautiful rainbow cloud. And he wonders, is the skylark, which sings such a beautiful song, like the rainbow cloud? But as soon as he comes up with this analogy, he realizes that it does not match up to the song of the skylark, because the rainbow cloud, however beautiful it is, when it rains, it is a normal rainwater that comes down. There's nothing of a rainbow in the rain or in the water that comes from the rainbow cloud, however beautiful it is. But the song of the skylark, it's beyond that. There's nothing ordinary about it. There's nothing that disappoints us. It is so beautiful and so unlike anything that we are familiar with. In the next stanza, he thinks that the skylark is almost like a poet. The poet himself remains hidden in the light of his thought. When you read a poem, it is the poetry that you encounter. The poet himself remains hidden. And so is the case with the skylark. You listen to the song, but you do not see the skylark. And it has the power in it, the power that you have in the finest lines of poetry that can move you to tears that you yourself were not aware of, feelings that you yourself were unaware of. And that is the power of the Skylark Song. It takes you to a higher level of experience, a sublime kind of experience that you did not know existed. And then he thinks of a third image. He is reminded of a young girl belonging to a noble family who's probably waiting in her palace tower, who's probably imprisoned there or made to wait for her lover. And she soothes her love-laden soul in secret hour with music as she waits for her beloved, as she hopes for his return. She soothes her aching heart with songs. And you can see the song overflowing or coming out of her bower or her private chamber, her room. And you do not see the girl, but you can hear the song. And so the skylark. It is unseen, but its song is so brilliant. Then he uses the image of a glowworm. The glowworm, again, is something that emits the light which you see, but the worm itself remains hidden, especially when it is in a dell or a valley that is filled with dew. It will scatter unbeholden, even without any prompting. It scatters its brilliant light among the flowers and the grass, which hide the glowworm from view. And similarly, the skylark, without any prompting, it just sings and sings in such a glorious manner that you are reminded of something so heavenly. The fifth image he uses is that of a rose. This is now the image of, in each one of these stanzas, you find one of the physical senses foregrounded. In one, it is the sense of smell. In another, it is a sense of hearing. In another, it is a sense of touch. In another, it is a sense of sight, and so on. In this particular stanza, it is a sense of smell, and he compares it to a rose that is embowered in its own green leaves. The green leaves almost hide it from view. You do not see the rose, but the fragrance is all over the place. And it's almost as if the rose is deflowered by the warm winds. The winds come and steal the fragrance from the flower. They steal it so much that ultimately it's almost as if the scent of the fragrance of the rose makes these heavy-winged thieves. The winds are being compared to the heavy-winged thieves. They're referred to as the heavy-winged thieves. They become so drunk with the fragrance, they become faint, almost faint with that sweet fragrance of the flower. That it is that kind of rapturousness that he associates with the Skylark Song. And then you have the last image of spring rain, another very common image of beauty that we human beings are familiar with, the sound of vernal showers. Vernal is spring, the sound of rain in spring. It is such a delightful sound, and when it falls on the twinkling grass and awakens the flowers, it is one of the most beautiful of sights that we have ever encountered. But it is still not up to the Skylark Song, which is joyous and clear and fresh, and it surpasses everything that we are capable of perceiving as beautiful with our limited resources, with our physical sense of sight, taste, smell, touch, and so on. We have perceived certain objects as beautiful, but the Skylark Song is beyond that. It is beyond any kind of physical perception of beauty. It is something that just cannot be limited by things that we can see and touch and feel and taste. It is beyond all that. The music of the Skylark surpasses all that we have so far known as beautiful. Having realized that the song of the Skylark is unlike anything that we human beings have ever composed or heard, the speaker now requests the Skylark for guidance. Teach us, sprite or bird, spirit or bird or whatever you are, what is it that gives you such sweet thoughts? He wonders if it is love or wine, the things that normally inspire human beings to compose happy songs. But love or wine never were able to inspire a song that was as rapturous, as divine as the Skylark Song. He then thinks of some of the happiest songs that we human beings have ever composed. One would be a wedding song, a chorus hymnal, a song sung in unison to celebrate a hymnal or a wedding, or a song that is sung to celebrate a victory, a triumphal chant. But joyous as these songs are, they never can match up to the Skylark's song. They seem to have something hidden, something lacking. They seem to have something lacking when we compare these songs to the Skylark Song. And therefore he goes back to wondering what the sources of the Skylark's inspiration could be. Is it nature, the mountains, the rivers, the seas, and the skies? Or is it love that has inspired the Skylark? Or could it be the fact that the Skylark knows no pain at all? He's at a loss as to what the source of the Skylark's joy and happiness is. But one thing is for sure, that the Skylark doesn't seem to experience any kind of languor or tiredness that affects human beings. The Skylark does not know annoyance. So none of the evils or ills that torment the human world seem to touch the Skylark at all. It seems as if it has never known the kind of languor or annoyance that trouble us. You love, the Skylark seems to love, but unlike human beings who after a certain point of time seem to grow tired of love, seem to grow satiated with love, the Skylark doesn't know the sad satiety of love. It seems to be constantly rejuvenated with love and whatever it is that inspires it. And the speaker can only conclude that in whatever state it is, waking or asleep or whatever, the skylark definitely has a higher understanding of life and death. It seems to have a far better, nobler, richer grasp of things. You must surely have an understanding of death. The thoughts of death constantly trouble human beings, but the skylark doesn't seem to be troubled by the thoughts of death. He's sure that the skylark must have a truer and deeper understanding of life and death than we human beings, we mortals have. Human beings are so conscious of their mortality. They're always worried about their death, the life that would be terminated with death. But the skylark is above all such temporal feelings. It belongs to a higher realm altogether, as a result of which its notes flow in a crystal clear stream. Unlike human songs, which, as the poet very famously says, our sweetest songs are those that tell of saddest thoughts. Even in our happiest moments, there is always the shadow of sorrow, of death, of worry, of pain, of suffering. We never celebrate the present in the way that the skylark seems to do. We always look for what we do not have. We are always worried about the past, worried about the present. We pine for what is not, and never ever are we able to laugh and sing in a sincere manner. We are always troubled by pain, by longing and suffering, and things that we do not have. Yet, if even we were able to, scorn all these things, hate, pride, and fear, and all those evils that torment our human life, even if we were human beings who did not have to shed a single teardrop, even then the speaker feels human beings would never be able to reach the heights of joy that the skylark seems to have, exceeded. And this is where he feels that the skylark is beyond anything that we are familiar with. It's almost as if the skylark is like somebody who is so scornful of whatever is on the ground, whatever is down below, and as a result of which it is able to scale the greatest heights, better than all the measures of delightful sound that we have heard, better than all the treasures that we have in our noblest creations, in our greatest books and classics. The Skylark Song, the skill of the skylark to compose poems of the greatest ecstasy, that is beyond anything of that belongs to our human world. And he is convinced about the fact that it is because the skylark belongs to a higher realm. It does not belong to the ground. It scorns the ground. It looks down on the ground. In that one phrase, the scorner of the ground, you have all of Shelley's abhorrence, his hatred of any form of earthy, worldly institution that deprives human beings of a full, joyous, and happy life. That is why he concludes in the last stanza, "Teach me half the gladness that you possess, and then I would be able to compose such harmonious notes that from my lips would flow the kind of rapturous song that the world would listen to as he was at that point of time listening as the skylark sang." To a Skylark is considered one of the finest works of Shelley and also one of the most typical. It's a poem that is rich in imagery largely drawn from the world of nature. The lyrical diction and the musical quality of the poem are its other unique features. The passion and the tone of reverence and wonder that run throughout the poem give us insights into the qualities of the poem as an ode. But more than anything else, this poem is unique because of the way in which it expresses Shelley's idealism, his revolutionary spirit, his optimism, his belief that a poet is somebody who can foresee the future and be the harbinger of change, a person who can create a new world of happiness and joy. The skylark here is metaphoric of Shelley's idea of a poet as a prophet. The skylark's ability to transport its listeners to a new experience of music is parallel to the way in which Shelley conceived of the ideal poet as somebody who can transport his readers to a new world of experience. And therefore, the Skylark's song is metaphoric of Shelley's vision of poetry. Shelley thought of poetry as harmonious madness. It is sheer ecstasy that flows through it, but it is harmonious. And that is exactly what the Skylark's song is. It is free, it is spontaneous, there is no rigidity in it. It is absolutely unbridled and free. It is a product of pure inspiration, something that is spontaneous and expressed in the most musical and natural manner. It comes from a state of mind that is of a very pure status, because it is in unison with heaven and nature. Now, from that kind of pure state of existence, nothing but joy can emanate. And that is what is captured in the Skylark Song. It represents an uncomplicated, a very simple purity of existence. There is absolutely no hint of melancholy or sorrow or any bittersweet emotion at all in it, as human joy or human feelings often are. So it is that supreme quality of poetry that is divine, poetry that is harmonious, poetry that is mad in the sense of absolutely free. It's something that just cannot be controlled or held rigid. And this divine quality of poetry is what Shelley conveys through the song of the Skylark. And that is what makes the poem so unique and so unforgettable a poem.
Thank you, Bindu ma'am, for that wonderful rendering of the poem. And I'm sure that the children will have doubts, and you will definitely be able to clear them. Possibly we will have another session basically to clear doubts. So as closer to the exam, we will be having that. And I would just like to read out something. To a Skylark by Percy Bysshe Shelley is an ode to the blithe essence of a singing skylark, and how human beings are unable to ever reach the same bliss. The poem begins with the speaker spotting a skylark flying above him. The bird naturally represents pure, unbridled happiness that Shelley is desperately seeking. I'm sure we also will be wanting to look for such sort of unbridled happiness. നമ്മുടെ ജീവിതത്തിൽ അതുണ്ടോ? ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ വളരെ നല്ലത്. We'll end on this note that all of us keep remaining happy, and see you in the next class. Thank you very much.